Welcome back to Road Gang Radio. Join Jimmy Mack and Lindsay Lawler's Gang of the Airwaves by subscribing to Radio Nemo on YouTube.
We celebrate all kinds.
Make it official. After all, if you're listening, you're already in the gang. The Road Gang.
Hey guys, by the way, we keep the living going by keeping you alive. One of the ways we do it is by having Highway to Health with Dr. Ben Kligler. He's the Executive Director for the Office of Patient-Centered Care and Cultural Transformation at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. It is great to have him back, as always. Really dig this conversation, by the way, that we're having today. Hey, Dr. Kligler, welcome back, as always. It's great to have you.
Thank you. Good morning, and I'm always happy to be here.
Let's talk about, those 8 components of the Circle of Health. And, I've been thinking about this a lot. I went to work out yesterday, and one of the things that made it easy was before I was wrapping up a couple of meetings, a friend of mine stopped by on his way to the gym, and he said, "Meet you there?" And I said, "Meet you there." And knowing that I had somebody to go there with, and look, this is a deeper conversation than just having a workout buddy. But simply having a supportive friend who is committed to their health made a big difference. That's part of what we're kind of talking about today, correct?
Oh, absolutely. And it's not at all, that's a great example because, you can talk about social relationships and friends and family, but then it all comes down to what are you going to actually do? So like one quick call or text to a friend to say, meet me at the gym, that makes so much, that makes a much more of a difference than just like us talking about it, And I'll throw you one more example of that. There's a lot of evidence that people that have, I know this is tough for truckers, but that people who have shared meals, and I think it can be with friends or colleagues, not just with family, but they end up having a lot of better health outcomes, including less problems with weight and lots of other areas. So just by virtue of eating with people as opposed to eating alone. So that's an interesting sort of twist on this whole idea too.
It was, like I said, I keep going back to this gym experience I had yesterday. It couldn't have been a more perfect day for me, Dr. Kligler, because like I said, I met my friend, he and I worked out. He had to take off immediately afterwards. But in the final minute of working out, another friend of mine arrived at the gym, and they waved at me. And when they waved at me, I actually pointed at them and said, "I'll meet you in there in a minute." And I realized I had a day where I went from meeting one friend and then hanging out with another. And I had a moment of check-in where I'm like, I'm at a place in my life where I have 2 friends, both of whom are over 45 years of age, so they're in my age circle, and having them, I just felt good about it. We should actually check in with our relationships occasionally, for good and for bad, to be like, do I have people that I can list them off as my friends?
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that's part of, when we sort of launch into this whole health approach with our veterans, or really with ourselves or with anybody, the first step is to do this walk around the circle like we've been talking about and check in on each of the different areas. So, friends and family, food and drink, power of the mind, and really ask yourself, well, how am I doing in this area? And we actually go so far as to say, give yourself a 1 to 5 on this area. Are you really strong here? Or, do you think it's an area where you could use some work? So the first step is really to go around and kind of make that assessment. And so when you're doing that as far as relationships, friends, and family, that is one thing you're going to ask yourself, are there people I connect with regularly? And then what we do once we've done that walk around the circle is then we're able to identify, okay, so which areas am I 4 or 5 and I'm feeling pretty good? Which areas are 2 or 3 where, I could really focus in on it? And that's where we help people start to think about, specific goals. What are the goals you want to set in that area? So I think that's a great way to start with this one is, how many people do you connect with regularly, whether they're friends or family or colleagues, and there's no definite answer. Like for some people, having one really good friend that they talk to frequently, well, that's great. For other people, it's got to be 5 or 10 or however many. A lot of that has to do with your disposition, right? And So there's no like magic number. There's no like value judgment on how many friends you have, but sort of asking yourself whether that feels like enough. I think that's a really good way to go about it.
And by the way, and we're actually heading in this direction anyway. So we understand with our emotional, mental, and physical health that it's actually okay to journal. It's okay to keep inventories. It's okay to set goals. It's okay to have like diet list or lifestyle change list and all that kind of stuff. Can we do the same thing for friends? Can we do the same thing for family members? I mean, can we actually, as silly as it sounds, can not programatize, but kind of, codify in the sense of like, here are the 10 most important people to me. I'm just going to keep a journal for how many times. I'm going to put a check mark for how many times I talk to them over the course of the week, or if in fact I check in with them, and to see how many of them really are my close friends. Not like judging them as friends. I don't mean that. I mean, am I doing the necessary work to maintain the relationship? Are there strategies for amplifying, not increasing your circle of friends, but making sure the ones that you have, making sure the family members that are important to you, Dr. Kligler, actually stay important to you and actually know that you are there for them and that they are there for you?
Absolutely. And I don't think there's anything, we have to feel strange about making a program in this area too, because, just, I don't know, like speaking for myself, I tend to get very absorbed, whether it's in my work or some of my other activities. And I don't always think about reaching out to friends to make a contact. And so what we do, when we walk around that circle, and let's say I say to myself, okay, well, social relationships, friends and family, I think I need some work in that area. Well, the first thing you would do is establish what we call a SMART goal. And that's specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time sensitive. And so what that means is, let's say you're talking about social relationships. That could be as simple as if you don't feel you're talking to your mom enough or your sibling. Well, I'm going to call them once a week for the next month. And real simple, it has to be time limited because you don't necessarily know that you can do it forever. And then you walk away with a goal. And the goal, if you're successful in achieving it, is going to strengthen your sort of reserves and your health in that area of social connection and friends and family. So, or another might be, and this one's a little harder, I think, but I'm going to have a conversation with someone I don't know very well. I'm going to start up a conversation with somebody I don't know very well. I'm going to do that twice a week for the next month. And that's another way you could go about it, because who knows if one of those people might turn out to be a friend. Or actually, it's interesting because even casual social connections have a health and a mental health benefit, even if it's not with your best friend. So, you're sitting next to somebody on a plane or at a diner or whatever, and maybe you don't know them, but what would happen if you just sort of made a little connection, struck up a conversation? So there's a lot of different ways you could go about approaching that, but I think it's really key to be specific and not just say, I need to talk to my friends and family more, but say, I'm going to do this, So I think that's a really, and I'm sorry to be going on about this, but people don't think about this one enough. We all think about, my diet needs help and I'm eating too much sugar or I'm not getting enough exercise. I mean, all that stuff is right in front of us all the time. But people don't think about the impact of social connection and loneliness on our health. And there's a whole lot of scientific evidence that loneliness has very negative consequences on your health in the long term. And that is something you can change. It's in your power to change it.
One of the things
I think this is a really good one to elevate in people's kind of thinking about it.
Well, I think it's really amazing too, because on our new platform, by the way, I'm just, I think about this every morning. People jump in on the chat on YouTube, and many of them are regulars there, and they tell each other good morning. Marshall Platter, who was a regular ongoing listener, just jumped in. He said he had a quality hold at Polaris in Laredo last night, so a bunch of us had to hang out. And that's just about kind of striking up friendships in the parking lot, striking up friendships at the diner and all that kind of stuff. I wanted to ask a question of not just recognizing loneliness in yourself, but recognizing loneliness in each other. And, there is a thing, and I'm picking on Z's, and I know they're all going to roll their eyes and give me a stare. But there are a lot of people, I think, who misread often the advance of somebody just being pleasant and friendly, and they kind of shut people down. What kind of effect, if in fact you recognize loneliness in a fellow human being and you connect with them, not just for them, we know we brighten their day, we brighten their smile. What kind of physiological effects does making connections with people in the world? And you said not, that Will Rogers' great axiom that a stranger is simply a friend I haven't met yet. But what kind of overall physical benefit? We have actual evidence of this having physical benefits of the chemicals it releases in our body and our ability and willingness to be more productive. If we're looking at it as a purely tactical act, it has immense benefits, does it not?
Yeah, 100% agree. And I think that's another really important point. The science shows that when you do something kind or compassionate for somebody else, and that could be as simple as, that lonely person sitting next to you in the diner actually responding when they say hello, right? It can be something very simple, but that it leads to all kinds of health benefits in us. And I think, why is that? It's hard to say, but I think it's because, from an evolution point of view, humans are meant to be social animals. Going back in history, we survived better if we had a family or a tribe that we got along with and we could protect each other. So it makes sense that connecting with somebody else would actually lead to physical and physiological positive benefits in your body because, think about it. That's how evolution works. If it's something that, if you have an action that makes you be healthier, you're going to be motivated to do that action. And definitely being in social connection over the course of human history. I mean, hard to point to anything that's been more important than that. The person who was out there alone in the world, they didn't do very well. And I think it's still the case, So I think you're absolutely right that it goes both ways. And I will say one of the things I've been doing recently, I can't say I was actually on a plane this week and I didn't do it. So just full transparency. But I sit down next to somebody on a plane. I say hello, which seems like, not that much. But on the other hand, I used to just sit down and intentionally not say hello because I didn't want to give any signals that I might want to talk. But now I intentionally say hello, and then I just try to get a sense of, well, that opens up the door if somebody wants to talk. Now, I don't always necessarily want to talk to that person for my own benefit, but sometimes it's really interesting. I had an amazing conversation with a woman on a plane not long ago, and she grew up as a Christian Scientist, which, is a very different kind of philosophy and religion than most of us, but certainly than I grew up with. And we just ended up talking all about her background and what it means to be a Christian Scientist. And I walked away with not only that feeling of like, oh, we made a connection, but so much new knowledge and information. It's really terrific. So I think you can get yourself into this kind of zone with very simple actions, like saying hello. I mean, that's pretty basic, but, I think it works.
I'm going to say something else too. This is going to sound a little negative, but it's meant to be anything but that. I tell people all the time, practice disconnecting too. And I don't mean like practice being rude, practice not being rude. Is that I know what you're talking about. There have been times where I've told people, we start shooting the breeze and I will just say full disclosure, I love a good conversation. There's a podcast I've been dying to listen to. But you really, I'll tell people at the beginning, you're pretty terrific, and I just want to keep talking for a little bit. But forgive me if I jump in or I grab some sleep. At the same time, you can set boundaries with people you just met in a way that is not insulting to them, doesn't tell, if you tell them from the top of the thing, the fact that you're getting 5 minutes of my time says you're pretty wonderful. I just, I have some things I have to do, productivity, I'm going to a meeting when I get off this plane, but I wanted to let you know you're there and you're terrific. There are ways of not leaving yourself open to what people always worry about that, like at a diner, you open the door and suddenly you're off to the races. And sometimes it's a great adventure in intellectual understanding. And sometimes it's like, oh my God, get me out of this. But it doesn't have to be that way. And the more we socialize, I think, the more we actually develop skills that allow us to extricate ourselves from a conversation without being rude, without getting to the point of the last nerve kind of thing that sets
Right.
really good boundaries at the top. And I'm not saying people should do this immediately, but the more you kind of talk to people, the more strategies you develop for kind of setting boundaries while at the same time leaving yourself open to learning about Christian Scientism.
Right. Absolutely true. And I think the more you practice that a little bit, then what happens is then you feel comfortable opening up that door because you know you can get yourself back out of it when you need to, right? I think that's really crucial, right? If you think, oh no, I'm going to start talking to this person, we're going to talk for 8 hours, and they're not going to stop. Well, that you might not want to make that first opening, right, to make that connection. But if you know, okay, after 15 minutes or half an hour, I can graciously put up a boundary, then yeah, what the heck? What do you lose? And in fact, you might gain by talking. So I think that's a really great point too. That practice that, and truthfully, we all grew up with different approaches to social connection based on our families, and a lot of us, I know I can say this for myself, I didn't get all the skills I needed in my family growing up. Some of them were great. Others I just didn't, I didn't learn how to do that. So it's really on us to kind of just push ourselves a little bit out there and try something, and I can't tell you enough, I mean, I know everybody knows this and we read about it in the paper, see it on TV, but the level of social isolation and loneliness in America right now is at an all-time high. Now, this is especially true, and it's very well documented in teenagers and young adults, that the level at which they report feeling lonely and isolated compared to 10 years ago is just skyrocketed. It's a little bit less true of older adults, but you could point to a lot of reasons for that, right? COVID was a big reason. We all got shut off from social contact for a couple of years, but obviously, I know we're on social media platforms, but social media is another reason. And, as we all know, that can be a real great vehicle for connection, but it can also be a kind of, like a decoy or a trap, or it makes us feel like there's social connection, but it isn't really giving us that same physiological kind of oomph that we get when we have a real person that we're communicating with, either on the phone or in person. So I think that this is, I know I'm going on about this, but the last Surgeon General put out a report, and he called loneliness an epidemic in America and really made a point about all the health problems that can come related to loneliness. And so it's really it needs to be a high priority for us. Absolutely.
By the way, on a really existential level, Hannah Arendt, the great German philosopher, felt that the prime mover in fascism and authoritarian movements was loneliness. She felt beyond
Isn't that interesting?
That beyond anything else, it was an epidemic of loneliness that caused the rise of the Nazi state. That people felt so isolated in a mechanized society and so kind of alienated from their fellow citizen that they developed a deep urge to join mass movements, to be part of something, no matter what that something was. That the authoritarian urge in all of us springs from a place of feeling like we're not being listened to, of feeling like we have no control over our lives, and that sort of loneliness. I have this really funny thing, by the way, and it happened yesterday, and my friends will back me up. I talk a blue streak, as you probably can guess. I'm actually easier to cut off on the air than I am in person. So what I tell my friends is, I say, if you on the phone, if you have to go, tell me you got to go, and I will literally go, okay, bye, and hang up. And I tell that to my friends because, or I get on I will talk, I don't even know half of what I'm saying half the time talking a blue streak. And I literally have friends who be like, would you shut up? That's just not right. And I'll be like, yeah, you're right. So yesterday, when I saw the second friend, she had shown up, and this is a wonderful friend. She was reading her friend's book and was actually meeting with them the next day to give them editing notes. And then finally, we were going back and forth, having a great conversation. She goes, "You're the only person I can do this with." She said, I have to edit this book." I went, "Bye, I love you." Got up and left the table. She burst into laughter. I said, "You told me we're done. We're done." And it's also in many ways setting boundaries for your friends by giving them boundaries as well too, saying, "I've had enough of your stupid self. Hit the bricks and get out of here." And you've got to give people permission to do that. You've got to
Right.
have an incredible sense of humor about yourself, because if you don't,
Yeah.
then there's no exit ramp from you. What is the line from Austin Powers? "There is no pleasing you, Mr. Powers." And you end up just kind of talking a blue streak, or venting your spleen, and there's no stopping you. You just kind of get rolling on that. So the idea of, you should probably correct the problem, but we have to almost give our friends our boundaries and let them know what they can say to us, and that way we can shut the hell up when it's time for us to shut the hell
Yeah,
up.
absolutely. And I will say, for your sake, I'm really glad you landed as a radio host, because you really nailed it there in terms of going with your natural strengths, and I can tell absolutely that it suits you. So, but yeah, 100%. And I mean, I think again, all this stuff sounds so obvious, but it's so hard to do. That idea of just being honest and transparent in our communications with people, telling them, when we need to go, or telling them when we need to connect more. And so you can even do a thing where somebody suddenly says they have to go. You could even say, "Geez, I'd really love to talk more. Let's see if we can connect next week." And then you leave that open too, without any big obligation. I just think we're not always so great at all that. And what I will say, one other thing about this is, and you obviously have this down, I can tell, when we talk about that circle of health, right? Well, right in the middle of that circle is this idea of what we call mindful awareness. And what that means is that, we all have these habits, whether it's eating habit, or a way I rush places, or not talking to somebody on a plane. And in order to change the habit, you have to take a minute and take a deep breath and say, okay, what do I really want to do here? Do I want to do it the way I've always done it? Let's say be gruff and walk away. Or do I want to try something else just this one time? And so I think that idea of just taking a pause, what we always say is, if you just take that pause, then you open up a whole world of possibilities, because you get to decide what you're going to do next, right? If you're just charging along and doing things the way you always do them 24/7, you never get to open up the opportunity of doing something a little differently. And so, that's another way when you look at any of these areas, whether, again, social connection, food and drink, power of the mind, any of them where you feel like you need more help or more work or more strength, it's really taking that pause is the crucial step. I mean, definitely, for example, with food and drink, before you grab that thing, is that what you want? And then you might end up deciding, yeah, heck, I want it.
Hey,
and I'm gonna have it.
Dr. Kligler, let me tell you something right now. There is nothing better than a donut that you mindfully decided to eat. I'm not
Exactly.
being funny. This morning, it's like, about once a week, right, Madison? I bring in donuts about once a week, and everybody goes and grabs one. You know why? Because I'm not bringing them in every day in a big giant box of 12 every day. So I bring in these
Right.
chocolate sprinkled donuts, and everybody can enjoy them, because it's like, nope, today we are doing this. You know what I'm saying? I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, today we're going to talk
Absolutely.
for 4 hours. It's going to happen. Buckle up,
Right.
It just,
So then you're eating that donut one bite at a time and enjoying every bite, instead of just inhaling it, which is what I would normally do.
Oh, let me
So
tell
I
you.
do think
And I get them at 5
stopping and
o'clock in the
noticing.
morning. I get them at 5 in the morning.
Yeah.
But good. I'm sorry, Dr. Click. I get excited about
Yeah.
donuts.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But shouldn't it be? I mean, you all are in New Orleans, right? So what about the beignets? Do you bring those in too, or?
Well, the problem
Not
is,
so
if we bring those in, we're all covered head to toe in powdered sugar. I mean, I mean, that's the problem. I have actually thought about picking up because we actually have a Cafe Du Monde that is actually in City Park, less than 5 minutes from here. But if I brought them
Yeah.
in, we would be covered in powdered sugar. Matter of fact, the last time
Right.
I had beignets, I was wearing a white suit, so things worked out pretty good for me. So.
Right. Might be risky for the high-tech radio equipment, though, all that
Yeah,
powdered sugar
all
flying
that
around.
powdered sugar. Yeah, it's it's pretty fantastic. I did want to ask you one more question. We don't have a lot of time. Our friend Dr. Ben Kligler joins us this morning, whose company we love so much. In many ways, it feels like getting a chance to spend some time in a diner booth with a friend. We often we often don't also reach out in times of loneliness. I do this thing where I've been in really bad places emotionally, where friends of mine were worried about me. I made a point, mindful point, of they would call to tell me to invite me to something, and I wasn't in a place to do it. But I told them all point blank, I can't make it. I'm not ready to come out. Please don't stop calling because one day I'm going to say yes. There are ways, even in our isolation and our depression, that we can mindfully remind our friends that we are there and still need help, right?
100%. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the most important things that people do for each other, right? Is be aware when someone, put up a little warning flag and be prepared to help when someone might need it. 100%.
Let me ask you something. When you are socializing, and you said that people who eat with other people often have better lifestyle outcomes. It doesn't mean though that you're now allowed to have donuts every day because you're eating them with other people.
I don't think it cancels out the donuts, no.
Yeah, we can get swept away. That the dopamine rush of invigorating friendships, the all of the wonderful all the wonderful things our body releases when we do this. What are healthy habits we can develop with friends? And we can spend the next time we talking about toxic relationships. But what are healthy habits we can develop with friends?
Well, I mean, I think particularly because a lot of the folks listening are truckers and may not always be around people physically that they love or that they want to connect with and talk with. I mean, I actually think, we've sort of lost the hang of talking on the phone a lot because of internet and, I'll send a text, I'll send an email, I'll post on Instagram. But I even think, and I know a lot of truckers do this, they're just on the phone with somebody and they're chatting about this and that. And it doesn't even have to be a deep and meaningful conversation, So I think phone calls are one way to do it. I think, what's an activity that, I have friends where, the way we get together is we walk our dogs. And the reason it happens is because, well, I got to walk my dog anyway. So why not fit this into my day? So thinking about, something that you share in common. You talked about your friends at the gym. What is something that you share in common that you would both naturally be doing that why not let's do it together, So I think there are a lot of different ways you can make that happen. There's really no limit to how creative you can get in that kind of area.
This is why social nerds live longer, guys. A good game of Dungeons and Dragons can get you much further down the road. There's nothing better than getting together with a group of friends and going on a grand adventure. I feel like we do that every time Dr. Ben Kligler shows up here. He's the executive director for the Office of Patient-Centered Care and Cultural Transformation at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. You can find out all about them at www.va.gov/one-word whole health. Dr. Kligler, as always, I can't wait for when you come back. We get a chance to talk again and catch up, and then you can tell me to shut up if you want to.
All right, I'm glad I know that now. So thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.